Hi, I'm Mark. This is Mark's Tech Vlogs on YouTube, and today I'm going to bring you guys a in-depth review of the new Aqara U200 smart lock. Now, this smart lock is particularly exciting because it is the first retrofit smart lock to officially support Apple HomeKey. And this means UK users finally get to try out this really cool smart home tech from Apple. Now, whilst my installation and initial impressions video actually went live a couple of weeks ago, I actually filmed that video about a month ago. That means at the time of recording this review, I've been using this smart lock for about a month. And I wanted to delay kind of between some of the other reviews that are coming out because I wanted to make sure I could bring you guys a in-depth review from someone who's actually used this for a reasonable amount of time. Now, at the start of this video, I want to tell you that this lock was sent to me by Aqara to review for you guys, but this was something I was looking at purchasing for myself anyway. And whenever a company reaches out and says, can we send you something to review? I always say yes, but it's going to be an honest review. And so that's what you're going to get throughout this video. Aqara also sent me their M3 hub to go alongside it, which is a hub you may or may not need with this lock. For most people, it's not going to be something you need. I will, however, in this video talk about who might need this hub. I'll also be doing a separate review of the M3 hub in the future, so make sure you subscribe if you want to see that. I'm also going to be making a comparison video comparing the U200 with the Nuki 4th generation locks and also the SwitchBot Lock Pro. So if you want to see that comparison video when it comes out in a few weeks, make sure you also hit subscribe. But let's kick off this U200 review and talk about the cost. Now, this lock retails at £269. This makes it around the same as the 4th generation Nuki Lock Pro and slightly more expensive than the SwitchBot Lock Pro. That being said, however, in the box with the U200 you actually get a fingerprint and keypad as well. That keypad can also scan NFC and of course therefore works with your Apple HomeKey. This does mean you basically get everything you need in the box other than a screwdriver. So alongside that in the box you also get some thumb turn adapters for all sorts of different locks. You get sticky pads and screws. You get some instructions, you get a USB-C to USB-C cable, and then you even get a pouch you could hook over your door panel containing a battery pack, so when you want to charge it, you can just charge it without actually removing the battery from the device. Essentially, all you need on top of what you get in the box to actually get this thing set up and running is just a screwdriver. You may also need a new cylinder for your front door, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But let's continue and talk about design. So this lock comes in a choice of colours, and on Amazon is a choice of black, which you're going to see throughout this video, and also a silver version. The design, as you can see, is very rounded and it's got several different kind of tones of black about it. On the front of the inside part, there is a removable cover as well. This allows you to easily get to the battery and also the set and reset buttons. The keypad follows a similar design, with numbered keys on the top and a fingerprint reader at the bottom. The NFC reader is roughly in the middle. Personally, I think both look super smart and really modern. One thing to note is that this is certainly taller than a Nuki, but it is about the same depth. Having used it for about a month, however, I actually think that super rounded design doesn't make it look too bad on your door, and I really like the way this looks because it does just look really modern. And I think that rounded design makes it look slimmer than it actually is. So let's talk about setup. So in my setup video, which I will link below, I went into a bit more depth on the setup process. But essentially how you set it up is going to largely depend on your door. The most important thing to note, especially for UK and European users, is that if you have a cylinder already on your door, it must be one that either has a thumb turn or one that can be still unlocked from the outside using a key if a key is on the inside. This is something you can easily test just by sticking a key on the inside of your door and one on the outside and seeing if you can still operate both. If you can't, you are going to need to pick up a new cylinder in order to use this lock, and I actually recommend picking up something like a Yale thumb turn one because they are more affordable than the double key cylinders. Having this emergency function with your cylinder is something recommended by Aqara. This means someone could still gain entry from the outside using a key. This is especially useful for someone like a cat sitter, but also if the battery was to run out. Once you've got the lock installed, you just follow the instructions in the Aqara app in order to add it. As part of this, it will also calibrate your lock and sense how far it needs to turn to lock and unlock. You can then also add it to your Matter compatible app of choice. It works with Samsung SmartThings, Google, Amazon, and of course Apple HomeKit, which is what I've been using it with. And this is actually why I had some issues getting it set up. And I found that in order to get it into my Apple Home app, it took a couple of restarts, it took me taking the battery out, putting it in again, and eventually I did get it into Apple Home. From that point onwards, when you add it into the Apple Home app, you get all the usual things such as giving it a name and assigning it to a room, and it also lets you set up Apple HomeKey. This will then automatically add Apple HomeKey to everyone else in your Apple household and also onto your Apple devices. So you basically do this in one place and it's available everywhere. So on your phone and your watch, but also for the other members of your Apple household. This is nice and simple. It's also worth saying at this point that you might want to bind it to the M3 hub as well. Now 99% of people probably don't need to pick up one of these hubs, and I will talk about that later on. Now I didn't start with the hub, but I did get sent one later on so I could test some of those features as well. And when I did come to bind it to the hub, I found that I actually needed to factory reset the lock in order to get it to talk to it. This also meant repeating that awkward HomeKit setup. This means at this point I have added it to my Apple Home app a total of 3 separate times, and each time it doesn't want to play ball straight off, and it certainly takes a bit more patience than I'd expect. And this is something I have made Aqara aware of and something other people have found as well. And this is something that is going to be fixed with software in the future. It's just worth bearing in mind that persistency is key. For that reason, I would actually suggest installing it in the opposite way to Aqara recommend. So I'd actually suggest getting it powered up and connected to the Aqara app and your Matter app of choice, such as Apple Home, prior to physically installing it. From that point, when you do physically install it, you can just recalibrate it in the Aqara app again. If you're having issues and you've got questions, do stick them below with the setup and I will try and help you guys out. But essentially, removing battery from the device and doing things like restarting your iPhone and maybe your home Wi-Fi are the key things I found that help get it into the Home app. It's also during the setup process that you add key codes and fingerprints into the Aqara app, but also you can add key codes into the Apple Home app as well. All in all, I think the setup process took me kind of 20 to 30 minutes, although a lot of that was playing around with Apple Home and getting it to work. When Aqara resolved those issues, I think most people could easily get this set up and installed in less than 15 minutes. During the setup process, you can also decide whether you want to use the included sticky pad to stick your keypad to the outside of your house, or if you want to use the included screws. Likewise, you can also decide how you want to power that keypad. So you can use the 4 included AAA batteries, but you can also power it using the same wiring as a doorbell. This is a really nice feature to have. This also leads us quite nicely to talk about the spec of this device. So as I said, the U200 is compatible with Matter, and in particular Matter over Thread. This is what means you don't actually need an extra hub to go with it. You can just use whatever acts as your hub in your smart home. Now you will need to check compatible Matter over Thread devices, but for me that is my HomePod minis. If you use SmartThings, Amazon or Google products, you'll probably have something that's equally compatible. The inside part of a lock that does all the turning is powered by a rechargeable battery. This battery life Aqara say can last up to 6 months. In using this for a month, I think Aqara are probably about right with this, or maybe even underestimate that. When it comes to charging it, you can either take the battery out and plug it into a USB-C outlet somewhere, or you can use the included bag and something like a power bank. This allows the lock to still be operational whilst charging it, which is great. Of course, you'll get a notification when the battery is getting low. Likewise, you can monitor that battery status in the Apple Home app and also in the Aqara app. It's only in the Aqara app, however, you can monitor the status of a keypad. Now, as this is a retrofit smart lock, you can still unlock from the outside using a key, which is great if that battery life was to completely run out. This is also great for less tech-savvy family members or even occasional visitors who you might just give a spare key to. This lock is compatible with Euro cylinder, Scandi cylinders and also US deadbolts. For UK users with things like multi-point doors, you are still going to need to lift your handle in order to engage the multi-points for your door to lock. This is the same as every retrofit smart lock that I've used. It's also worth noting that it does support a latch mode. This means if, like me, even if your door is unlocked, you still need to put a key in and give it a little extra turn in order to get in from the outside. This lock can do that little extra turn for you. And you can toggle that latch mode on and how long that latch is held down for in the Aqara app. Then when it comes to the outside keypad, that keypad can operate between -15 and 66 degrees Celsius. It also has an IPX5 rating. This means this is suitable for all kinds of weather throughout the year. That keypad takes key codes, fingerprints, and then can also read NFC tags and therefore Apple HomeKey. And this is something that myself and a lot of other people have been really excited about getting hold of in the UK. It also supports one-time pass modes, and the lock also has a quiet mode which you can trigger from the outside with that keypad. I will talk more about that quiet mode later on. And then that keypad takes 4 AAA batteries, or it can be powered by the same way as a doorbell. I can't find anything on the Aqara site that says how long those batteries are going to last, but it's largely going to depend on how much you use it. That keypad also has a speaker built in. This means you get some feedback when it comes to resetting the device and things like that, but then it also has a tamper alarm as well. This means when you remove it in order to do something like change your batteries, it will prompt you to put in an admin passcode, and if not, it will sound an alarm. And then in terms of security, your actual door basically remains as secure as the cylinder you have in it. So if you've got a 3-star cylinder, it's going to remain that secure. And then the lock itself also uses enhanced security to protect against hacking. It also has an auto lock function, and then the keypad has some tamper alerts as well. That means a certain amount of failed attempts will lock the whole thing down for half an hour. You can change this amount of time in the app. This stops someone just being able to put in a load of random numbers. This is all great for keeping your home safe, especially as this lock does have something from the outside that potentially shows people in the know that you do have a smart lock. Now the other thing to mention when it comes to security is that I have heard other people talk about the Nuki and the idea that you could reach something through a letterbox and push the button on it. Of course with a Nuki someone has to know you've got one in order to do that, but it's a reasonably valid point. Now this lock doesn't have a quick button, it just has a thing you can turn. And I think it'd be pretty difficult to turn this from the outside. Now this lock does have a sort of twist assist function where you can turn it a little bit and it'll kick in and do the rest. If you're worried about somebody able to put something in your letterbox and kick that into play, then I just wouldn't use it. I personally don't think it's a big issue though. And then finally for spec, we should talk about whether you need that M3 hub or not. And the M3 hub is an expensive extra, costing £120. It isn't just a hub for this smart lock, it also relays infrared remotes and works as a Zigbee hub and all sorts of other things as well, and I'll talk more about that specifically in the hub review. But really most people aren't going to need this. But it is worth saying if you've got something like Aqara G3 camera already, this is actually the only hub that works with the lock. This is because of the matter over thread. If you do choose to pick up the M3 hub, it does give you a couple of extras. So firstly, it allows you to create one-time passwords remotely. These are designed to be used once and only once and expire 24 hours after use. Secondly, you can manage and control the lock remotely wherever you are in the world using the Aqara app. This, however, at the time of recording is quite limited because quite a number of the actual settings in the Aqara app require you to press a key on the keypad in order to activate it. That means at the time of recording, if you have remote access with the hub and you're not connected to the lock's Bluetooth, all you can do is turn on or off the auto turn mode, adjust the lock configuration, and then of course lock and unlock it and even drop the latch if you need to. And then the hub also allows you to use the lock with some Aqara automations. And realistically at the moment I don't think it's worth anyone getting the hub. And that's largely because the out of home access is available in the Apple Home app already. And if you wanted to add passcodes remotely, you can equally do this in the Apple Home app. What I would like to see is Aqara update the way the hub works in the future so that you can do things like update key codes for visitors remotely. This would make this really useful for someone who runs, say, an Airbnb. At the moment, you can't do that. I should also mention, as we come to the end of spec and get into using this lock, that there are currently no geofencing features. That means you can't auto lock or unlock the lock. Aqara are working on this and this will come out at some point in the future. You can, however, once again achieve this in the Apple Home app. There is, however, a kind of auto lock feature in the Aqara app already. This is where the lock will detect if you close your door and lock it automatically for you. Now this is currently in beta testing and it's not really something I've tried out because I have a lift to lock door. That means before my door can actually lock, I do need to lift the handle. Otherwise it will just result in a jammed notification from the lock. So now we've talked about the design and the spec and the price, let's talk about actually using this because I have been using this for about a month. And actually minus the issues I had getting it into Apple Home, I am really impressed. Now in order to do this review, I've been trying to unlock and lock it in as many different ways as possible. And I'm going to talk about all the different ways you can do that, but I'm also going to talk about the ways I generally use it. And my favourite way to unlock it from the outside is with Apple HomeKey. And to use it, you simply hold your phone or your watch up to that keypad. Your phone or watch gives you a little bit of taptic feedback and a thing on the screen, and the lock kicks in and opens. And the time between you holding your wrist up to that keypad and the lock actually kicking in is really, really quick. And it's quicker than any other lock I've come across. The other thing I've noticed, especially for my lock, is that U200 does seem to know a bit more how much it needs to turn. That means it doesn't do a load of extra turns of a key when it comes to locking and unlocking to the point where it catches, it just does a little bit. That means it still locks and unlocks every single time, but it doesn't do it a whole way. This makes the whole process quicker without compromising on any security. When I have used the other features of that keypad, such as putting on a fingerprint or using a key code, I found that it equally responds just as quickly, and that fingerprint scanner is really responsive. The same goes via opening it with the Apple Home app as well. Essentially, whichever way you use to trigger this lock, it kicks in and responds really quickly. And at this point I want to talk about that latch mode. And that's for users who've got a kind of night catch on their door. That means if the door is unlocked, you still can't get in from the outside without putting in a key in and doing a little extra turn. Now the Nuki gets around this by having three modes. It has an unlock, a lock and an open. And the open mode does that little turn for you. The U200 doesn't do this, but if you put a key code in from the outside, or use your fingerprint, or use your home key, it knows that it needs to do that because you're coming from the outside. That means it does that little turn for you. This means if you've just gone out to put the bins out or something, you can easily get back in. And this actually makes the process really simple. And the only place you can't toggle this kind of latch mode is actually in the Apple Home app, because at the moment the Apple Home app only supports locked and unlocked states for front doors. This is something that has been updated in Matter 1.2, but we don't know when this is coming to the Apple Home app. If you do need to use the app to drop the catch though, you can do that in the Aqara app. Of course, you could also just lock it in the Apple Home app and unlock it again. Generally, however, for locking and unlocking and getting in, I just use Apple HomeKey most of the time with my watch because it's so easy. And then when it comes to locking it, I actually really like the lock button on the outside. That means when I come to leave the house, I can just lift the handle up and tap the lock and it kicks in and locks the door for me. I do also have an automation set up in the Apple Home app for when the last person leaves to make sure it's locked, and also to lock it at 9 o'clock every evening. And as I've said before in other smart lock reviews, automations in the Apple Home app when it comes to locks are slightly quirky. That's because a location-based automation that does something to a security device like a lock actually requires the user's consent to run. That means in the Apple Home app, if you have when the last person leaves, lock the door, when you get far enough away from your home, the Home app will say, "Can I run this?" Of course, this still requires a manual action. My personal way around this is to trigger a dummy switch when the last person leaves. You can also do this with a smart plug that perhaps you have plugged in that you don't use for anything else. I've got this set up to turn off when the last person leaves, and then I've got a separate automation that says when this turns off, lock the door. And this happens without any need for a prompt. It's also worth saying that you could use something like Siri to toggle it as well if you wanted to with your voice. In the Apple Home app, you're also able to create passcodes as well for guest access. There's some new features coming with this and locks in iOS 18 as well, which I can't wait to try, and I will do an updated video when iOS drops in the autumn. But again, whichever way you lock the Aqara U200, it kicks in and locks really quickly. And then from the inside, the easiest way to get out is just to twist that knob. Now, as I said, it does support an auto turn mode, which you can turn on the app. And that means if you twist it a little bit in one way or the other, it will kick in and carry on for you. Now, I have found this doesn't actually respond especially quickly, so I have it switched off because it's just as easy just to do it manually. And then when it comes to the Aqara app, which is where you need to do things like calibrate the lock, there are a few other things to mention. So firstly, you can adjust the failed lockout options. This is when someone tampers with the keypad, perhaps if they're trying to gain access. This will lock out the keypad for a certain amount of time. You can adjust how long this time is in the app. You can also set up things like night latch mode, or passage mode, or change the calibration, and kind of a load more settings in the Aqara app. There's also the option for a do not disturb mode in the app as well. Now, quite a number of these settings actually require you to be connected to the lock via Bluetooth in order to see them. One of the more interesting features of this lock, and something that I've not talked about so far, is quiet mode. And in terms of how loud this lock is, when it's in the kind of normal operating mode, it basically sounds about the same as the Nuki. Therefore, it is slightly louder than the switchbot. Personally, this isn't something that bothers me, but you can adjust the volume settings of the lock. And essentially changing these to quieter will make the lock turn slower. This is great if you do want the lock to operate quietly. You can even trigger this mode via the keypad. For example, let's say you get home late at night and you don't want to disturb anyone. Prior to scanning your Apple Watch or putting in your key code, you can press the tick or confirm button first, and then do your action. This will cause the lock to open in quiet mode. And then there's some other things you can do in the Aqara app that you obviously can't do in your Apple Home app. This includes adding different users, and there's 3 types of users you can add. You can have admin, general, and temporary. Now, each user can have up to 5 fingerprints, 2 passcodes, and 2 NFC tags. For temporary users, you can also choose when they're able to access your home. This includes between certain dates, between certain times on those certain dates, and also time periods in general. You can also add repeats as well. This is great for occasional visitors to your home like cat sitters or cleaners, and the sort of people who only need access to your home perhaps during certain times during the week, or even during certain dates. All passcodes in the app can be between 6 and 10 digits long. And of course, the longer the passcode, the more secure it is. And all of this is nice and easy to manage via the Aqara app. That includes removing them and revoking access. The main fault of this at the moment via the Aqara app is that even if you're using the M3 hub, you can't do this remotely. This is because you have to wake the keyboard in order to kick this in. Now, of course, for most users, this probably isn't an issue, but it is an issue if you're going to be an Airbnb host. If you did, however, want to manage key codes remotely, you could do this in the Apple Home app. And then when that person's gone, you could just delete that code. Of course, this is a more manual action, but it is a way to achieve it. But all in all, at the end of this really long, in-depth review, what is the verdict on the Aqara U200 smart lock? And when Aqara announced this back in September, I had really high hopes for this lock, especially as it was going to be the first ever retrofit Apple HomeKey lock. And personally, when I received this, I was expecting it to become my favourite smart lock and become the best retrofit smart lock, especially for UK users. Alongside that, I'm also expecting it to pave the way for us to start seeing things like Apple HomeKey from SwitchBot and also Nuki. But the question is, have Aqara delivered and met my expectations? And generally the answer to that is yes. But there is a caveat. And I'll explain that caveat first. At the moment, for me and some other users that I've come across online, there are some issues with getting it set up, and it doesn't seem to add to the Apple Home app as easily as it should. And personally, I don't think things should take resets and playing around with your Wi-Fi to get them set up. I do, however, think this is something that's going to be fixed very soon. But at the time of recording, it doesn't make the setup process as simple as it should be. And that's why, as I said, I recommend adding it to something like Apple Home before you install it. The other downside is the ability to manage those key codes remotely, and other than the kind of temporary ones, I think you should be able to manage all of those out of home. And that's a tiny thing because that isn't really something that bothers me, but it is worth mentioning, especially if you're someone like an Airbnb host. But those are the only two downsides, and the rest of this lock is absolutely incredible. It responds quicker than any other smart lock I've come across, which means it's way quicker for getting a key out of your pocket. Apple HomeKey is absolutely brilliant, and I love just being able to wave my watch by in order to open it. That's especially true for the latch mode, when you kind of perhaps go out and put the bins out and you want to quickly get back in. With the new key, I had to reach for the app and use the open mode. I also love that simple lock button on the keypad. This makes quickly leaving and locking really easy, although of course I do also have that geolocation thing set up in the Apple Home app. And then when it comes to design, whilst the lock is taller than the new key and the switch bar, I really like the design. I think it looks modern, and the different options of colours are great for different front doors. And then, as with the switch bar and the new key, the ability to unlock from the outside with a key still is great if a device was to run out of battery, but also for less tech-savvy family members. There are, however, at the time of recording, a few features missing in the Aqara app. This includes geolocation mode, but it is something that's going to be coming later on. For me, however, who likes having everything in the Apple Home app, this doesn't matter because I can achieve it there. I also love that for the price point, you do get everything you need in the box, including that keypad. And this actually makes this device pretty good value for money. All in all, apart from the setup issues I've had with Apple Home, Aqara have made a fantastic product with the U200. And this is the smart lock that's going to be staying on my front door. And for me, this is my favourite smart lock, largely because of Apple HomeKey, but also because it does just work well and really efficiently and really quickly. If you guys have got any questions about this lock, do drop them below and I'll answer those for you. I've put links below where you can purchase the lock as well. They are Amazon affiliate links and will go to whichever country you are in. If you do make a purchase via that link, I'll get a very small cut of what you spend, and that helps me keep this channel going. This isn't my full-time job, and I deliberately never take sponsorships for videos because I want to make honest reviews. As I said at the start, Aqara did send me this to review, but I will always make honest reviews and tell you how it is. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a like because that also helps this channel out. Subscribe if you want to see new videos when they come out, and I'll see you guys again soon.